guys doing today? Thank you for allowing me to speak to you guys today. And thank you, Carlos and Sergio, for allowing me to come and kind of present a little bit about search engine optimization in JavaScript. And what I want to talk today about is kind of, that little 10% that usually developers forget about, right? And that's SEO. Usually you just want to push the project out there and just get it done, get it live, but there's things that you forget that you have to push with it, right? And what I want to do is I kind of want to go over why I think JavaScript is a great way to get better search engine optimization rankings. And I also want to talk a little bit about how bots look at JavaScript, right? Debunk some of those myths about JavaScript and SEO. And lastly, kind of talk about how Google parses the information for JavaScript, and kind of talk a little bit about the other search engines that we don't really talk about a lot, which is kind of Bing and Yahoo, right? So to start off, I have about 14 years experience in search engine optimization. Actually started in SEO, doing black hat SEO, and quickly learned that was not the right way of doing it. Those of you who don't know what black hat SEO is, just building links with no strategy. Just trying to build as many links as possible overseas, just so you can rank. Because the algorithm for Google before was popularity equals better positioning. Now, especially with the introduction of artificial intelligence, it's more about experience, it's more about relevance. And yes, links are still important, but it's all about that relevancy, right? How relevant are you, and are you bringing content that works for that specific audience? So I kind of covered this at the beginning, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about JavaScript and why I think that's going to help as a search engine optimization person that just deals with it every day, why JavaScript is a great way to be able to get segues into better search engine optimization opportunities. Number one, JavaScript brings experiences, extra experiences that HTML and just CSS doesn't bring, right? It brings ways for the user to interact with the website, and that helps the user stay on the page longer. So these types of kind of integrations allows us to kind of create an experience that's a little bit above and beyond, right, to attract the traffic. You have, for example, the St. Louis Browns created an online museum for their baseball team. For tourism, Humboldt County, California created kind of like the travel and tourism come to Humboldt County. They created a whole JavaScript site to kind of experience and indulge themselves, right? So when you're building trust, you want to give the user the experience they're going to get and the value they're going to get from your product, from your service. And it cannot even be that. It could just be something as simple as creating a map where you can find all the cracks on the sidewalks where you can't have your baby carriage go, right? Because you want to make your baby fall asleep. Those types of kind of applications that help the end user. And that's what JavaScript can bring to the table. The thing is that with engaging content, you can actually bring newsworthy backlinks. So if you create an application that people want to use and want to come back to, you create an opportunity for people to want to come back to you or even talk about you and link back to you. That's at scale. That's not you hunting for links. That's people wanting to know more about you. So you're creating an experience that goes above and beyond than your competitors, above and beyond than any of the other noise that's out there. And that's what JavaScript can bring to the table. Also, time on site. Time on site is a metric that it seems to be a pretty strong metric, especially with positions. I've seen where websites tend to rank and rank higher than their competitors just by looking at content or a piece of content that allows a user to stay on their page longer. So I've seen that in a lot of different blogs, and I've tested it myself, where I've seen better rankings just because of that. And that can mean one position, but one position can mean how much more traffic. Between 1 and 2, there's a 50% drop in traffic. So if you want that one, then you need to create an experience that's a little bit at another level than what your competitors are doing. So there's a balance that devs and designers have to understand. you have to keep your traffic and you also have to keep Google's crawlers both happy. And how do you accomplish that? Well, you need to let Google into your heart. You need to let Google just take over and be able to just look at every single aspect of your website. So that's the segue into the 3 challenges in JavaScript and SEO. Number 1 is the ability to crawl. So what are the bots crawling on your website to understand the experience of your website? Number 2, obtaining information. Can that bot obtain the information that's within your website? Are you making it easy for them to understand what your website's about, what your website's talking about? And last, site latency. Are you making sure that your website's fast enough and reachable enough for the bots to be able to get to that information? So the first one is, what I want to do is debunk the whole thing about JavaScript and Google not understanding JavaScript. That's not true. You open your JS library to Google, they will understand what your JS libraries are. They will understand exactly what you've coded in there. So you want to be able to let Google be able to look at all your JavaScript, but here's the thing. So Google is always way ahead of the pack. Bing and Yahoo has not yet started crawling JavaScript. And the reason is because, with Google, the main mission of Google is to bring information to the world, right? So they want to understand web experiences. So they're always thinking artificial intelligence. They're always thinking at scale. With Bing and Yahoo, there's still steps to take to get there. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. They're just currently not able to do that. And with Bing, it's been a month and I've seen 4 or 5 releases just for their Bing Ads platform. So as they produce more ability to do that, you'll see a lot more opportunities for search engine optimization, things like that. So when it comes to the ability to crawl, number 1 question, can your bots access your information? Are you accidentally blocking JavaScript files? And are you replacing HTML tags with JavaScript events, like the proper linking of a website? So number 1, can bots access your information? Number 1, you need to be able to add your website, of course, to Webmaster Tools, which is now rebranded to Google Search Console. I don't know if you guys know what Google Search Console is. Well, I'll explain it a little bit further, but Google Search Console allows you to put your website on their kind of dev tools, right? And it gives you kind of a big picture of how your web's tech is doing, how the web crawlers are looking at your site. You can set things from crawl rates, so how many times it hits your site. You can set things from parameters of the country, the language. It just provides you a lot of things of how you want Google to perceive your website. So you need to provide Google with that access to your website. So if you're running Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, it's as simple as a few clicks and you let Google right into your heart. That's it. The next one is Bing and Yahoo. So Bing Webmaster Tools is another one you want to have integrated within your website. It's as simple as a quick meta tag, and you're able to provide access to Bing bots, and you're able to do kind of exactly the same thing as Google with Google Search Console. But with Bing, it's a little bit different because you don't have as much access with Google. It's just a little bit more limited, but you're able to still provide them, the hierarchy of your sitemap. You're still able to provide them a lot more of the technical aspects of your website so they can understand how to crawl your website. So, number 1, give them the ability to be able to access your website. Number 2, so when you're looking at a menu, don't use JavaScript events, use HTML. If you're looking at and you're creating content, make sure you use HTML. Bots understand HTML links and do not understand the on event. So if you want the bot to understand that that link is important and the page is going to is important, I'm not saying to do that for a thank you page because that's irrelevant, but if it's going to a service page, an information page, somewhere where you want Google to crawl, then you definitely want to make sure that it's an anchor text, right? And rule number 3, smash the hash. And what that means is that many of us have been in that situation where we've seen that a URL, especially if it's going from one end of an e-commerce platform, a marketplace, or wherever it has to parse information, sometimes it has a hash at the end of it. Google likes pretty URLs. So you want to make sure that the URLs that you're creating have no hashes, they're just worded exactly with just dashes between them, right? So you can use something like Push State History API, and this is something that Google has advocated. It's actually a Firefox product that you can use, and it basically uses your browser history to be able to render the information that it needs to. So if you're going from, let's say, you're going to the bottom of a page for a specific hash, instead of doing that, you use this specific API, and it'll render it almost as pagination. Page 2, page 3, page 4. That's the right way of doing it. That's the way Google likes it, right? Okay, so ability to crawl. You have also robots.txt. How many of you guys have known robots.txt? Have it implemented on your site? All right, perfect. So sometimes your site may not be ranking. You've added everything to Google Webmaster. You've added everything to Bing, and you're still not seeing anything. Well, more than likely, you're still probably not letting Google into your heart because you're still blocking it on robot.txt. And this happens a lot. And it happens more often than you think, because you might think that a specific JavaScript library might not need to be used by Google, so you just block it anyways. Well, to give you an example, this is what we use at CNC Machines. And basically, this was just a WordPress platform, part of the WordPress platform we used. But as you can see, we disallow anything that we just don't want the bot to access, and it's usually just pages, administration pages, paywalls, things that a person's experience is part of a membership application or something that's behind a wall that you don't want bots to be even near, right? But everything else, any JavaScript libraries, anything that you want that's part of your website's experience on the front end, you want to allow Google to be able to access all of that. So, as I mentioned before with Bing and Yahoo, do the same thing for Bing and Yahoo. Their release, I don't know when they'll be able to parse JavaScript, is going to be able to still allow you to do the same thing as Google within time. But also, there's a thing with Bing and Yahoo where even though it doesn't read JavaScript, any content that's relevant to your page that you want Bing to be able to understand your page with, any text, any links, you need to make sure that you put it outside of the JavaScript, right? So if it's like a title tag and description and then some content on the page, try to make sure that that's HTML formatted so that Bing can understand it, right? Because Bing is just still not there yet. Now, if you don't care about Bing, then screw Bing, just focus on Google, right? So, this is what happens when SEOs don't talk to developers. Marketing departments are all segregated within the whole department, and nobody talks to each other. Hulu suffered a 56% search visibility drop because they blocked their JS from Google. And all Google was seeing, and they rendered the pages, every time Google would render the page, it was just complete 404. So imagine all of those pages Hulu had just dropped off the face of the earth. And it just continued getting worse and worse and worse. So that brings me to the fact that Google is lazy. Google does not want to do anything else but just read your content and move on, okay? It doesn't want to log in, it doesn't want to scroll, it doesn't want to click, it just wants to look at the information that's accessible to the public, and that's what it thinks about your website. So you want to try to make a user experience equivalent to what you want Google to understand about your website. So if it's an e-commerce platform and you want it to understand your category pages, you want it to understand your product pages, you need to make it friendly enough for Google to understand that. You know, adding content, making sure that the URLs are not just everywhere, just crazy URLs with with just search parameters everywhere. You want to make sure it's pretty enough for Google to understand. As an example, when you search for a city, state, and I've been in the travel, I was in the travel industry for around 4 years. And one of the things that we did was the category pages sometimes did not rank depending on the customer. And the reason why is because they just parsed whatever URL came out of their libraries, and it was just, that's the category page. Well, what happened is that when we introduced prettier URLs, we introduced HTML content, they started ranking. If you look at Expedia, if you look at hotels.com, whenever you search for a specific hotel location, you'll see those category pages ranking. And if you notice those pages, you'll see content, and if you look at the inspect element, you'll see the content is made into HTML, because you want the bots to understand that. Now, there's a lot more SEO factors than just that, but just so you can understand, when you're developing this software that's engaging for the customer, you want to make sure that you add those elements within them, because you want Google to also understand your page, not just your customer. Because if not, your customers won't find it. So when it comes to speed, there's the 5-second rule. So according to Google, you should aim for your website to load within 5 seconds, and that's mainly for the bot. The bot should be able to parse your information within 5 seconds. And the faster, the better, right? But it's not always the case, right? There's just so many ways to create a part of the site that, you know, you have heavy JavaScripts and that are loading within your website and things like that. But I'll speak about that in a little bit. But you want to make sure that your website loads as fast, or your content that you want Google to parse and understand about your website loads as fast as you want Google to understand it. So it's not only about the experience, also when it's loading the site, you want Google to understand your page as fast as possible. Anything after 5 seconds, Google just, again, Google's lazy, so Google would just go to the next thing and not let your site be able to show all the information that it can. So then you have JavaScript errors. So for you to be able to rank on Google, especially for those pages that you have JavaScript in, you need to make sure you don't have JavaScript errors. Because what happens is the bot will find these errors, stop, and just go to the next thing. So then your page will not be able to rank on Google. And lastly, test, test, test. So Google Console has an awesome feature that we use every day in our office called Fetch with Google. And Fetch with Google will allow you to see how a user sees your website and how Google sees your website, and will tell you whether it's partial. And partial doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means there's sometimes some libraries that might be blocked, and that's because it has nothing to do with you. You're just citing it from another source, right? But as long as you have that green check mark, you know that your website is rendering with Google. And you can do this on the mobile side and on the desktop side. Remember, mobile is a whole different search algorithm than desktop, and they're both separate. So you want to test your site for both mobile and desktop, and you want to make sure that Google can see your website the way it parses it. So knowing this, your site latency is important. And Google's critical rendering path, which is actually a course that's free on Udemy, allows you to understand exactly how Google wants you to parse your information, and actually how they want you to load your information on Google, on your website. But a lot of times you'll have problems with scripts. So these are some of the actionable things you can do. You can add the JavaScript as HTML inline, and that'll speed up the process. You can place the JavaScript lower in the page, so anything above the fold will load faster. Or lastly, asynchronous. I mean, most JavaScript things that I've dealt with, they say they come asynchronous. I always run into problems, but usually it just works as good as just putting async source equals whatever that JavaScript is. So in conclusion, what I want for you guys to take from this is basically, when it comes to SEO, you can't give up on the JavaScript part of it, right? You just have to just continue testing and continue fixing, but don't forget about that element, because you must be creating a great product, but if you want your great product to be found, you need to add these elements when you're coding, right? Because you don't want another Hulu situation in your hands. You don't want to be just trying to get those customers and those page views into your site and not being able to see anything at all. So I would definitely recommend the first thing you guys do tomorrow is add your sites to Google Search Console, play around with it, because it has a lot of developer-friendly tools that allow you to see how your websites are doing. And if you work for a bigger company, they might have an SEO department. Bring donuts to the SEO guy. They'll appreciate it. And just tell them, hey, can you show me Search Console? For example, I like talking to devs. I like organizing myself with devs. And the reason is because they're the ones that are going to make my projects come true. And not only that, they're the ones that I can talk to and explain why these steps will go further for the application or whatever company I'm working for. So when it comes to the SEO and the devs, they should be together. Of course, you have the element of user experience and things like that where you want everybody to work together, but it usually doesn't happen. So I would definitely look at the SEO, try to see if it can give you a login, and you can get into Google Search Console and kind of play around with that a little bit. So I created a little JavaScript QA. Don't kill me. I don't know anything about JavaScript other than what I can do with Google Tag Manager. So I don't know if I did it right. So you guys have any questions at all that I can answer? We can always do it afterwards, but anything you guys can come up with? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of really great information. I think sometimes we get too into the weeds of creating a cool app, so we forget about some of the SEO and some of the new stuff, how the crawlers work. Do you think you would be prepared, maybe if after some questions, to maybe demonstrate? I think it would be valuable for some of us to see in practice how some of these tools work. If you feel like you
I can definitely do that.
Cool.
I can definitely do that. I'll have to log into, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I can definitely do that after some questions. Yes, sir.
Have you played with like Lighthouse or any of those things? When you think of that in the Google the audits section, have you ever got a chance to play with that? Or
So I haven't. Basically, I've never played with Lighthouse before, but and I'm assuming you're talking about a specific SEO tool, right?
yeah, it's in the Google browser,
Yeah.
and it runs different tests and things.
Yeah. Oh, with the so usually I've had devs work with that. I'm kind of like the glue, right, within SEO with the dev. But if it's a Google product, it'll definitely correlate with what's on Google Search Console. But there's nothing that tells you as good as Google Search Console, because that's the tool that they use for that.
Isn't Lighthouse more for like performance stuff?
Well, it tells you SEO,
Oh, it does?
accessibility,
Oh,
different
okay,
tests
gotcha.
that run, like
Okay.
But I mean, as far as for search engine optimization, I've used Google Search Console without any problems. And as far as accessibility going to that, for example, with JavaScript and things like that, this always